and welcome to Dip In and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I'm very fortunate on this, I'd like to say nice Friday morning, but it's a bit rainy here in Manchester, to be sitting down with Paula Hollstein Barría. Paula is a PhD, graduate now, is it? Are we?
I'm
yeah?
almost there. I think
Almost
I need like a certificate, but it's in process.
It's
So we
there,
can say the
it's on the way.
almost PhD person.
Almost, yes, yeah, further along than most people, I would imagine. And Paula specialises in domestic abuse. So obviously our conversation this morning will be around Paula's work, but Paula does a lot more than that. And I think it's probably best to hand over to Paula to explain a bit more about what she does and why she does it. So good morning, Paula.
Good morning, Lucy. I'm really happy to be here. I'm very honored to share this space with you and share a little bit of my work. So yeah, basically I'm researching about the phenomenon of domestic abuse, mainly from the victim perspective, and specialize in how victims got involved in these dynamics, trying a way to demystify the kind of archetypical victim that the law tried to portray, that is a mere recipient or mere target of a perpetrator, saying that victims are very active in the process, not saying, of course, they are not victims, but they resist, they have to negotiate, they have periods of honeymoon, they get deeply immersed in the mind of offenders or perpetrators, so they get deeply implicated somehow in the phenomenon, making them to feel completely, in a way, unable, trapped, or in a situation which is really difficult to leave their relationship. Because in some cases, mostly in cases where there is no physical aggression, it's really difficult for them to realize what's going on in this kind of very odd kind of relationship. It's usually what I try to say, this media and the law and prevalent narratives about domestic abuse are kind of very sometimes gruesome, violent, but it's not always the case in many cases, or even in most cases, especially in the beginning of the relationship. So I try in a way to explain how the story is somehow different from the idea that most people have about domestic abuse. That's my main aim.
I love that. And you know what? You've summed that up perfectly. I think if everybody could just hear that, they maybe would understand a bit more about how complex domestic abuse is. Because you're right, it's changing that narrative, demystifying it and saying, actually, it doesn't just affect certain people. It can happen to anybody, and that idea that society, the law, all these systems that are in place are meant to help these people are actually more often than not doing them harm, because they're either not believed, if they haven't reported it to the police in the first place, well, there's no evidence of abuse. That doesn't mean that, as you said about the physical, if somebody is emotionally, psychologically, financially, all those other abuses that go on, you're not necessarily going to report that. What are the police going to do about that? If you're saying, well, actually, I have no control over my finances, my partner does, that is abuse. But it's all these very subtle ways, like you're saying at the start of the relationship. Very rarely it is physical. That builds over time, if at all it does happen, because obviously it doesn't happen in every case. And most people would say, I didn't walk into a relationship thinking, right, this person's going to be abusive. Nobody does that. Nobody walks in thinking that this is going to happen to them. They go into that relationship thinking that that person cares about them. And you're right, it is that very slow burn, isn't it? Slow build. And we often use the word insidious. It's very kind of how it plays out. But the work you're doing is so important. Really is.
Thank you very much, Lucy. So I think it was like it's something that was unavoidable to me, because I'm also like a victim survivor of domestic abuse. So I'm coming from Chile. My background is legal. I'm a lawyer in Chile, But even though I was in a sort of kind of privileged situation, like knowing I wasn't a specialist in family law, but I had a kind of very general understanding of the law in my country. And even though I was a person with a certain kind of knowledge of that, I couldn't match, I couldn't like relate my experience, what was the law at that time in Chile.
Yeah.
Um, and also in South America, violence is the prominent word to describe this kind of experience. So it was even much more difficult for me to realize what's going on. Um, so yes, it was a kind of unavoidable path that I needed to somehow, I feel that I needed to have somehow follow to understand
Mm.
what happened to me. Because in, as you say, in the moment that was happening or right after, I was telling the kind of the odd experience I had to, I don't know, personal friends or even a therapist. um, there were skeptical faces that is it's really, and it's really even more harmful, because you know that something happened, there was a violation, that there was something really important that happened to you. Your body is telling you that. Sometimes just your body is telling you something, this kind of general anxiety, or you feel that your body is effervescent, you had a pain there that wasn't there before. So you try in a way to connect the dots. There was something here, and you try to communicate that experience. But as people are somehow as so familiar with other type of narrative that's really related with incidents, gruesome incidents,
Yes.
they show you, okay, yeah, this is doesn't sound right, but I don't think it's,
I
I
don't,
don't
yeah.
know. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it's the case. Maybe you're sensitive. I don't know.
You know what, you wouldn't, well, I'm sure you would believe the number of well, people that have said certain things about what have happened to them over the years and what's happened to them. And the awful thing is, so often it's that case of, well, it does sound a bit like they would be in this or they would be, it's almost defending them. It's almost defending them and
Yeah,
saying, well, but it's indefensible. And that's what's so heartbreaking, like you say. So when people do, and the courage that it takes to actually admit to yourself, admit to others what's going on. I mean, it's really laying yourself bare, isn't it? It's something so personal and so private that you actually go looking for the help and support, and then you receive this, well, maybe they were just being a bit childish that day, or maybe they were just, no, there's no maybe about it. You know the perpetrator and you know exactly what they're doing to push whatever buttons they want to push, to get reactions that they want to get, whatever it is. And that's where the people who are in those positions should know better by having the training and having that understanding, and it being talked about more, because like you say, it is very much this pigeonhole of, well, it's not really an incident, we can't see any bruises, there's no kind of, so therefore it isn't an incident. No, it's a pattern of behavior that goes on and on and on and on. One
exactly.
incident, that's what gets you, is if it's almost like they want that to happen, say, well, that's abuse then. Well, actually, we need to go back to the drawing board and redefine how we think of abuse, don't we, really? That's where the problem is. It's become this idea that if you haven't been hit, and a lot of the time victims and survivors and people I've worked with will say, oh, but they never hit me, so it can't be abuse. And then you have to very gently start to go through the process of explaining that somebody doesn't have to hit you, push you, be physically violent towards you for it to be abuse.
Exactly. Yeah. And now, for example, in England and Wales, and I think in Scotland as well, have been introduced this new offense of coercive and controlling behavior, which is really like kind of step forward in the understanding of domestic abuse. But even though you tend to think that a controlling behavior is super evident, like there is let's say an order or a threat, a command, and then like a consequence of that. And it's usually not the case, like an outburst of angerness, a completely unpredictable behavior, a sort of kind of sometimes kind of kind of perverse attitudes, withdrawal affection, silence treatment as a way of, in a way, demeaning and trying to belittle you is somehow the regime, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily you are going to identify a threat. You are going to identify a negative outcome. You know that's what's coming, let's say. And
Yes.
that could be something that is angerness, withdrawal, affection, but not necessarily, oh, I'm going to, hit you, or I'm going to do this about you. Sometimes, yes, but it's in combination with a more despotic regime that you, even if you follow certain rules, the rules usually change. So that's really kind of crazy making, because the person who is the perpetrator, the offender, the abuser, usually not necessarily they want X, Y, Z outcome of you. They want you. They want to control you completely. So they
Yeah.
are going to change the strategies all the time.
That's
And if
so
that person is smart or is and has been in their way of living very instrumental, they're going to be very sophisticated
yeah.
in their way of behaving. So it's really difficult, but in my research use personal narratives to try in a way to show, rather than sometimes like explain in an abstract way as the law does, to see how it how that happened, because it's something that can change from couple to couple, to family. And it's really important to understand, as you say, it's a pattern, it's a regime,
Yeah.
and not necessarily take the form of identifiable incidents, identifiable threats, identifiable physical aggressions. Usually, most people realize that something is wrong because you get sick, you are
Yeah.
constantly walking on eggshells. That is a very common phrase that people use. You are completely stressed. Um, but you also, as a victim, try to deny somehow, undermine those feelings, say, well, I'm being working a lot. Maybe this is going to change. It's a difficult moment. So
Yeah.
there is the abuse, and also at the same time, there is a narrative around society, around your the closest circle, and even in yourself, that deny somehow the abuse, that try to ignore or redescribe the abuse as something else. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
Oh,
it's like a thriller. It's like a debate
it,
about reality.
it is, and well, I agree with everything you've just said, and I think that's what's so frightening is it is like watching a thriller, but there's never been any film for me that really can depict it in the way that you've just described it. And you're right, when you were saying then before about it's you, it's not the situations that they're trying to control, it's you. It's always about the victim. It is always about, and even if you, and I will always say, if you are fortunate enough to leave, because not everybody can, and that's
Yes.
very much an assumption a lot of the time, and there's a million reasons why somebody may stay. And again, it's never our place to judge why somebody does that. But if somebody does leave, then it's not automatically going to get better.
No.
Inevitably, I think in majority of situations, it will get worse, because again, they're losing that power and control of you. You are the target. The whole purpose and everything they do is about you. And it's so difficult when it's society, and again, for victims and survivors to speak out. When they'll say, well, maybe your friends and family say, well, he always seemed like a nice person, or she seemed like a nice person, or the flip side is, oh, I always knew. They all of a sudden become judge, jury, and yeah, they knew it all along. They were, they knew, but
Yeah.
and that doesn't help either. It's,
No.
and ironically, a lot of the people who say these things potentially could be in an abusive relationship themselves,
Yeah.
projecting their own opinion onto what they think somebody else's life is like. Well, sometimes maybe we have to look at our own lives and think, are we in a perfect relationship? Do we have mutual respect, honesty, trust, genuine love, all those things? I think more often than not, people want to, and again, I'm going to say this, whether people will agree with me or not. I think a lot of the time, the public as themselves don't want to think that they could potentially be in that situation. So for them, it's, well, it can't happen to me, so it's on you, and keep pushing back to those victims and survivors that actually have had the strength to speak out. And that's, to me, what is quite, well, very dangerous, is there are a lot of people who don't want to believe it, don't want to well, it doesn't affect me, it's not my problem. And actually it's everybody's problem. We're seeing it more and more in the news every day, aren't we? Awful, awful things that are happening where, you know, I'm not saying it could have been avoided. A lot of the time we don't know all the circumstances, but saying, you know, why did they do this? Why did they do that? Why are you trying to second guess what somebody does? Everybody reacts to things in different ways. Everybody's personalities, you know, we all have individual thumbprints, you know, so at the end of the day, we are individuals, we are unique. So to try and say, well, why did somebody do that? You're not walking in their shoes, are you? You're not living their life. So that's, for me, that would be something I would love to see change, is that blame and shame culture that so many people,
So yeah, as you say, actually in this regime of control, the most dangerous moment is the moment you leave. And there are studies, at least in South America, that most femicides actually happen right after the victim decided to leave the relationship, because it's the ultimate act. It's the ultimate act of control. Let's say, there's a try kill the person involved. So it's really difficult. And yes, most of, like, you can see most of people and even authorities say, yeah, please report these cases or go to the police and leave those relationships, when in fact is really difficult. It's really difficult, even for people who are not, like, because there are sometimes economic reasons that make even impossible to leave those relationships if you are dependent of that person, of the family. But even if you're not in that situation, it's really difficult for you to understand what's going on and what is in place, because you try in a way to negate or deny that that's happening to you, because society in a way don't want to hear these stories. As you say, there is a projection. Oh, that happened to them. That's not my case. And it's really nice the way you say, well, it's everybody's problems. It's everybody's problems. Could be the case of your children in the future, and could happen to everyone. Women, different socioeconomic backgrounds, but also men. Absolutely. And in the case of men, for example, it's really difficult, because of course there are gender ways that this kind of abuse could shape somehow the abuse. But for the case of men, they are not the ideal victim. Let's say there is not the victim that is in the mind of the police officers or in the media. So it's really difficult for them to understand that they are victim. And even though they somehow realize that, it might be the case, I'm in a situation where I'm victim of domestic abuse, it's been proven that if they go to the police officers, they are not going to believe immediately.
No.
Because people don't understand the phenomenon. They tend to think that it's physical. So if there is I don't know, like a tall man, people will tend to think, okay, I don't understand what's going on, and how come might this happen? So it's like, I think it's really, as you say, it's everybody's problem, because this kind of situation could cause like a very ingrained and pervasive harm in people. And this is not going to go away, sometimes not even in generations, as being a stud. Yes, that's another line.
You know what? I'm with you. And that's the sad thing. You know, when we were saying before, in terms of it could affect your own children, it could affect your brothers and sisters, it can affect your parents, your grandparents, for all you know, that generational trauma, that generational culture of, well, you know, my granddad was like that with my grandma, or my auntie was like that with my uncle, and that's normal, and that's how the family, you know, behaves, and that's how. But actually, you know, parents can also be the enablers of the perpetrator and say, no, you've not done anything wrong. And I can think of quite a few cases where I've seen the parent as the perpetrator, who is actually telling the perpetrator, you know, you're not doing anything wrong. And it's come down to manslaughter, it's come down to murder, it's come down to all these terrible things. And actually the parent is still defending them and saying it's okay. So if a perpetrator is being told by the people that they probably trust the most themselves is everything's okay, well, I've done nothing wrong. And so often a perpetrator, and again, this is something really hard to explain to society, is perpetrators don't think they've done anything wrong.
Yeah.
If you speak to a perpetrator and you try and have that conversation, which is not very easy because I say they're tongued like a corkscrew. It's just so twisted, and you'll never get to the truth. That actually they don't think they've done anything wrong. You know, they think that, well, it's my relationship, it's nothing to do with you, and how do you then do that? And like you say, it's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. And if we don't talk about it, sweeping it under the rug isn't going to make any difference. We've got more and more people on the planet than ever before. Therefore, statistically, more and more people will be exposed to abuse and potentially obviously experience it, which sadly is the case. But this is what gets me, is we don't seem to want to make it something that is taught in schools, i.e. in an age appropriate way, but that education about relationships, and relationships start at school. Not in I don't mean in a loving sense, but your friendships start to form then. Your societal little pockets of friendships all start to form. And there will be people within those groups who are the perpetrator or the alpha male, female, whatever. And children will start to think, oh, well, it's okay because everybody loves them, so they must be okay. So it's already been ingrained. And then if they're going home and experiencing it, you know, we need to be as human beings, and especially within the school system, to me, is saying, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. This is where your boundaries are. If your friend asks you to do X, Y, and Z, you are allowed to say no. You know, and I don't know what the answer is as to how that comes across. But to me, it should be compulsory from really the sort of towards the end of primary, where children are starting to change, their bodies are changing, everything's starting to, you know, a new time in life where they're going into secondary school. And that's, for me, that's the only way it could ever possibly change, is if we do start actually addressing it and not say, oh no, it's not something we can talk to children. We can't do that. Well, probably quite a number of those children in that classroom are experiencing it anyway, without you even knowing it.
Exactly, yeah, and it's precisely in those moments as it's a great idea. I haven't thought about that, and it's, you know, there is the bullying thing that happened in school. It was pretty normal for the people for our generation, and
Yeah.
that's the really moment that you started to deal with power relations. So I
Yes.
think it's key. It's really key to understand how we should treat ourselves in in the in the schools, in our workplace, but even most importantly in our private, our intimate sphere, because there's in that places where like power relations get really bigger, you know, like more intense, you are more exposed, you are vulnerable, you are a human being, of course, that needs care and affection. So you are really vulnerable. We are vulnerable human beings, of course, but in that intimate sphere, of course, we are even more vulnerable. So it's really important for, as you say, from kids like from an early age to really understand how we should behave, how we
Yeah.
should to take care to each other.
Yeah.
And I think it's like society in a way try to deal with this issue as it were kind of like crime. Of course, it's like a
Mm.
very serious thing, but I don't think, and it is just a personal belief, that if we just follow the punitive um, thing, we are not going to address this thing from the roots, you know.
No.
It's just a way of saying we are dealing with this, but
Yeah.
if it's, I think it's too late. And I
Yeah.
don't think that any victim that have to endure a trial or, and as I think it's even another trauma that probably they will need to bear for life. So that's my personal opinion. I don't think that as as the justice system as is equipped now, they don't have the elements to do like a reparatory journey for the victims. It's not reparatory at all. So as you say, it's really important to take measures in other spheres of society. Education is one, taking care of each other, like really changing the way we think about relationships, instead of just saying, well, this is an offense, this is a serious thing, and we are going to take to prison this person. Sometimes that could even worse the situation, because the victims
Yeah.
know that what's going to happen is really serious. They may have children, properties in common, and this somehow this could be even worse for the victim situation, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, that's
It
a
is.
it's a very long discussion, of course, and will take many layers. But I think what you say is key: education from the early age, and rethink the way we, in a way, relate to each other as a human being an important element.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. That has to change because, and it can only change if we start actually accepting that we need to talk to children about these things. We talk about mental health, and
Yeah,
your mental health is impacted by abuse, and your physical health can be impacted. And in terms of, I did a post on LinkedIn yesterday about the family court system and talking about, all the elements of that. And from what I'm gathering from people I'm talking to in America, in Canada, all over the world, it's the same the world over in the justice systems. It seems to
yeah,
be that it's the same. We think in the UK, oh, it's terrible. This has happened and that's happened. Nobody's believed, and the victims and survivors are the ones who are punished and treated as if they're the criminals. But it sounds like it's the same the world over, and that's
yes.
frightening. That is frightening. That to me is, how, especially when it's the judicial system, how on earth is that going to be changed when obviously it does seem to be. I just thought it was here that was, but then when you start talking to people from here, there, and everywhere, they go, no, 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 it's the same here. No, 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 it's the same here. And again, in an ironic way, it seems to be that there's a pattern of behavior within the courts, as there is a pattern of behavior in abuse. There's this saying that you hear these people talk about their experiences of court, and it's just there's a blueprint. It sounds like the perpetrators all do the same things, all their barristers, all their representatives all do the same things, play all the same tricks. And it to me, I think it's absolutely mind-blowing. And it is going to take a long time. But if we do start trying to go back to grassroots and say, look, we need to talk about this from a very early age, from sort of 10, 11, that kind of thing, where children are able to, they know the difference between right and wrong, don't they, by that point? So if we explain that, in schools very often, like you said before about bullying, you're 100% right. And what a lot of schools will do is say, well, it does happen, the children they've got to find their own feet. But actually you could be putting that child in harm's way in the future by actually you're saying to them, well, this is life, this is what happens, toughen up. Well, if that's a child that is also experiencing that at home, which nobody knows about, you've just signed their fate, and we need to just dig a lot deeper, I think, definitely.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm loving this
definitely.
discussion. Oh, Paul, I'm loving it. So passionate. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm so passionate as well, Lucy. Yeah, as you say, everywhere, like at least as far as I know, in all the West, happened the same with the justice system. They,
Yeah.
in a way, crystallize the abuser story, the abuser story, which is like, there is not like a clear incident here. There was something that was provoked by you, or was just a bad moment for me, or it's just a toxic relationship, or it's just here and there. Oh, sorry, had a very previous experience in the bad, wasn't in a very good moment. And the court somehow replicate this kind of perspective about abuse, that has to be something really physical, like an assault, or something that you clearly identify, because yeah, law is very oriented to evidence, of course. So
Mhm.
they don't open their mind and trying to think, oh, there is way to prove also pattern of control, or pattern of like a regime of control as well. But they are so used to the kind of the incident moment model, that they are somehow replicating the abuser perspective. And for victims, it is really kind of frightening, because they are really somehow struggle alone to say, well, this is my story. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to communicate that. And when there is people who actually discredit or disbelieve this kind of story, it's just crystallized trauma. So I think it's something that happened everywhere.
Yeah.
And maybe the justice system is not the ideal way to deal with these kind of things. We need to start early on, or maybe there is the discussion must to be broader. We romanticize family and relationships, as many feminists have said. So we tend to think that family is like a happy place by default, and
Yeah,
that's not the
that's
case.
yeah.
That's
Oh
not
God,
the case. Power
no.
relations are there, and we need maybe to start there as well, like rethink completely the concept of family and relationship. There's not something that magic happened there, and like as Disney has been telling us. So it's like it's a thing that
I
we.
blame Disney. I blame Disney, giving us
Me
all this
too.
sugar-coated life where everything's perfect and everybody rides off into the distance and it's all wonderful. Yeah, I blame Disney. You're right, but again, you've hit the nail on the head, and it is that ideal that we have of what family is like, and like you say, that power. What did you call it then? I love that
Power relations or
power
power
relations.
dynamics.
Yeah, I love that because it's so true. And if you look at so many of your own relationships within your family as you get older as well, because what I said to somebody the other day was who you are in your 20s and who you are in your 40s, 50s is more often than not very different. You've learned a lot, you've lived through a lot, you've experienced a lot, and you start to look at your own family, your extended family, etc., and sometimes your friends as well in a different way. You see things differently because you're sort of going, never realized actually they're quite controlling. Or you start going back through your own childhood going, oh my God, I was always told by X sibling what to do or whatever it would be. And it's maybe, that's part of the process for a victim and survivor if they are on that journey of trying to move forward. Because I will always say it's trying to move forward. There will be days where you feel £1,000,000 and you feel great and everything's, going your way. And then there will be days where you pull right back to the beginning. It might be something that the perpetrator's done. It might be something where you've gone to court and it hasn't gone the way you thought it was going to because you thought you were telling the truth and you thought that would be enough, and so there's so many kind of twists and turns in the road that maybe on that journey of trying to move forward, it is sometimes helpful to look back at your own childhood, at your own experiences, at your own relationships and previous relationships, and not to blame yourself, but just to unpack that and go, that makes sense now. That makes sense now. And actually, you're finding out who you are alongside everything you've gone through and everything you've experienced. But look where you are now. And I do say that very often to victims and survivors is, they'll blame themselves, say, oh, but I accepted this or I put up with this. Yes, but look where you are now. Look at what you've experienced and look at where you are now. That's incredible. You're an incredible human being. You've experienced all of that and you're still standing, and dealing with 50,000 plates spinning at the same time. And that's where I think we need to validate victims and survivors a lot more, don't we? I think we need to really let them know that they're not on their own, because so many people feel so alone and don't know where to turn. And that to me is why I started doing what I'm doing. I never wanted anyone feeling like they had nobody that was on their side saying, you are believed, we do understand.
Well,
Yeah.
what you say, Lucy, is really inspiring because we need to create this. Well, this is the way I see it is like create communities, and you are doing that with your project because we need to be by the side of their victims of survivors, not for to telling them you need to leave. This is a toxic
No.
relationship. It's just okay. This is your situation, and I validate your experience. I can relate how you feel, and I will support your decision, whatever it is, because nobody is in the shoes and the other person. You don't know the barriers they may face every day, or even in the past. That's kind of like the blueprint you say is somehow so pervasive, so I don't know, like ingrained in the history of the person, but just not being alone,
Yeah.
not being just dealing with yourself and with your mind, like in a crazy making situation, it's sometimes enough for like keep going. And
Yeah.
eventually something will happen, I'm sure. Like, even if you decided to stay there, or I don't know, like how to accommodate your life is something that is really personal, but something might happen if you have a community, if you have someone to validate your experience, say, understand, and I will be here in case you need me, and I'm here, like listening to you. And what happened to you is real. Sometimes it's like,
Yes.
it's just that thing is so important. Say, oh, this is not just my mind, or like a sort of speculations and just my body telling me weird things. No, that's real, and
Yeah.
that's not okay. So I
Yeah.
think projects like what you are doing is just, it's just amazing and make the difference. So I really want to
Oh,
thank you, Lucy.
oh,
And
Paula, thank you. Oh, don't you'll make me cry. I did. I just
no,
won't. Oh, you're too kind.
no, I think it's really important. I've been like, well, my path was like, I don't know. It's something that the way that I imagined right, dealing with what happened to me was studying, because I don't know. I was a good student in the school, so I decided, okay, I'm going to understand this from this point, well, in this path, you know. But I haven't had this kind of conversation in a broader community, like never. I would say just right after my PhD, like, or during my PhD, a couple of them. But now it's happening, and it's really important, even though it's like happened like more than 10 years. But it's really important to have this conversation, because you are with a person or with a community that somehow could understand you, and that make such a big difference. So yeah.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you. And you know what? You're spurring me on to keep going, because it's, to me, these episodes are so accessible. They're so, we don't make it difficult to listen to. Yes, sometimes, the conversations, people might think, oh, that's really got to me. But actually, it's about saying you're not on your own. And yes, that look at how many people are in agreement that this is wrong, that this isn't acceptable. And like you say, it's not okay. That's 100% what we should be saying, is it's not okay. But yeah, just to keep going and doing what you're doing is phenomenal. Oh, I think we're gonna have to do another episode. I'm not
No,
gonna lie.
definitely. I will be happy.
I always find it weird when I say I've thoroughly enjoyed this, because people just go, you thoroughly enjoyed talking about domestic abuse. Oh, okay. Like, no, I love it when you connect with somebody and you really get that chemistry
Yeah.
with them, and you're like, yeah, we get it. We both get it. Oh, it's amazing.
So I will be really honored, Lucy, to collaborate in any way in what you are doing. So that make a difference, definitely. So
Oh,
yeah,
thank
thank you
you.
very much for just
Oh,
sharing this a couple of thoughts of my work. But yeah.
oh no, you're amazing, and thank you for all you do, and thank you for taking the time this morning.
No,
Oh,
that's all right. That's my pleasure. And apologies, I'm not a native speaker, so if you kind of
you
struggling with the
listen,
way I was
you're
talking.
more native to the English than I am to being able to speak any language, to be perfectly honest. I might know hello and goodbye, and that's about it. So no, please don't apologize. I think you're incredible. And a lot of the time thinking, my God, that's the things you were saying. Yeah, incredible. No, we'll all have understood sometimes I don't think people understand what I say. I'm Northern.
No, I love Northern accent. I love it.
Oh. So, well, hopefully we always sound quite homely, I think, us Northerners, but
Yeah, definitely.
comforting. That's what it is. Oh, Paula, thank you so much for this morning. It's been amazing.
That's been
Thank,
amazing. Thank you very much, and thanks all our listeners.
thank you.
Thank you.
Where